Can you tell us your name, your age, and where you're from?
Oluwaseyi Coker, 33 years old, and originally born in Lagos, Nigeria.
And where you living now?
Toronto, Canada.
Awesome. And tell us a little bit about yourself. Like, what do you do for work?
So at the moment, I am not working. I'm focused on a few different things. Going back to school for creative writing at Toronto Film School, and also just like a lot of creative journeys. Starting a podcast with some friends, and just really like embracing like my creative side.
Awesome. And what did you used to do before for work? Like, what led up to you making this transition into getting into the creative side? Like, what did you used to do before?
So I've had quite a few different jobs, but the last couple of jobs was management and retail. I've done a lot of retail managing, visual merch work, and like stuff like that. And then as well as working in the addictions and mental health field, I worked for a treatment center called Renaissance as a program assistant, overnight counselor, and did some volunteer positions prior to that at places like Alpha House, as well as a position at a private facility that is no longer available as their on-call staff, as well as their live-in counselor and their step-down.
Okay, so what brought you into the counseling side and the addiction side? Is that something that you yourself suffered with?
Lived experience for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, there was definitely lived experience there.
Okay, and let's talk about that a little bit. So, became a counselor. Like, you got into that because of lived experience. What kicked that off for you? Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Like, what was some of your story there?
So I think the catalyst for like how I got into that environment, and the reason why I even went into working in that environment, was because a lot of the places that I ended up finding myself, being of service to, were places that helped me at a very young age.
Okay.
And I think when we're young, a lot of us just party. It's part of the culture, kids being kids, university days, frat parties, keggers, all of that. And I don't think I realized when, just that line got crossed,
Okay.
and when I couldn't stop anymore. And I think there became a point in my very early 20s, in fact, 21 for the matter of fact, where I realized that like it wasn't normal anymore, like what is normal, but it wasn't like the picture of just like the young teenager partying. I crossed a lot of lines that I never thought I would cross. I had done a lot of things that I never thought I would do. And I found myself in a lot of dark places, but I also didn't know help like that existed, which is why these kind of environments and establishments and services that I now know are available are important to me,
Okay.
because they saved my life in one way or another.
Okay. Now, let's touch on that a little bit too, because you mentioned it started off with the partying, right? And I think our audience would like to know a little bit about what that looked like for you in the start, right? Was it did it start earlier on, or like the high school times, or within university? Like, when did it start, and what attracted you to that lifestyle?
So if I should talk about where it started, I grew up in New York as well. Born in Nigeria, around age 9, moved to Staten Island, New York. A couple of weeks before my 16th birthday, we moved to Brampton. When I was in the States, I had a lot of extracurricular activities. Played football at one point. Then when I was in high school, I was in the drama club and school musicals, dance club. And there were all these things that kept me from kind of just focused on that like typical high school student that just like partied all the time. And so I tried smoking some weed when I was in the States. I tried drinking. A lot of teenagers try it out at parties or whatnot. And, my story was more of those where like I blacked out or I greened out, and I was like, I can't do this all the time, because I had all these other things in place. And it was when my family moved here, and all of these things that I had kind of disappeared. And I had all this free time suddenly, and I was in school. And so I kind of got introduced to the all age club scene kind of stuff. And that's where I really got into like trying different other substances, and really felt that, like they call it in the recovery field or the recovery community, the I have arrived moment.
Okay. And did it kick off more when you were in New York, or when you came here to Toronto, Canada, or was it in both? Like, where did it actually start kicking off?
I would say here.
Okay.
Yeah.
And talk about that a little bit further. So you mentioned you get into the partying scene. What did that look like in the early times of that?
I didn't know anything like that existed. And I think for a kid like me who had spent most of his adolescence being part of some community or another, like, sports or creative communities, yeah, there were parties, but like it's different than the all age club scene, the rave scenes. For those who are familiar with Toronto and the club scene, like Government was still around, and being 17 years old going to a club like Government, and in that environment, seeing DJs like Dead Mouse and stuff like that, it's just like you're like, whoa, this is
Yeah.
beyond me. It's exciting. It's rebellious. And I was kind of a little upset at my parents for the move because I felt like I was taken from all these things that were such parts of my life. And what better way to rebel than to just like dive into that world?
Okay. And so what were some of the early I know within the rave scene there's a lot of drugs are rampant, right? What was the first, like, for lack of better words, like designer drugs or stuff outside the traditional weed and alcohol that you started dabbling with early on?
Funny that you asked that. On the very first night that I tried chemical drugs, I tried multiple chemical drugs all at once.
So you just went right
I
in.
was very much like, all or nothing. You might as well try it. And so on the same night, I think I tried cocaine, ketamine, MDMA, and like I said, I felt that I arrived moment. I was the guy that said yes to everything.
Right.
So it was just like, let's go.
Okay.
Let's try it all.
Now I know you tried a combination of drugs and stuff like that in your first time. What drug did you gravitate more towards?
Initially, it was all of it.
Oh, so you just wanted the whole gamut.
Initially, it was all of it. I wanted to feel all of the feelings because it took me away from anything else I was feeling.
Okay.
I got to disappear. I got to just be in this whole other world, be this whole other person. And, in that environment, when I'm not used to that environment at this time, I'd never really been like a club kid or anything like that. So it made it easier to coexist. It made it easier to be part of. It made it easier to do whatever I wanted to do. I felt invisible.
Now, you touched on something there. You made it easier to sort of exist and be yourself. Can you talk about that a little bit further? What about yourself were you so conflicted with? Like, what was pulling you in all these different directions where you couldn't really understand yourself?
At that time, I think I was just figuring some of that out.
Okay.
But I think what was the key point was like fears and inhibitions were kind of gone. Like, there were times before that where maybe before doing something, I'd be like, should I do it? But when I was in that world and on those drugs, it was just like there was no limit. We just did. So a lot of fears and inhibitions were gone. Now, in that time period, I got to explore and experiment parts of myself.
Okay.
And there were a lot of questions that came with it that contradicted the way I was raised, culturally, religious. But what I ended up finding out at the end of that journey around the same time in that early 21, as I realized, things had pushed past the line, was that I was a gay male. And that was a hard reality to hit because, like I said, it contradicted everything. And when you look at the way I was raised, it absolutely contradicted being a Christian, being Nigerian.
Right.
Just it wasn't okay with me. And I don't think it was that it was not okay with the world, but it wasn't okay with me because it defied everything I was raised to believe.
Okay. So I could see the struggle there, and I guess you struggled with yourself as well. Like, when did you come out to the world, to your family?
I think everything happened in that same year. It was 2013.
There's a lot that happened in that year.
Yeah, it was spring, and I think I was on a lot of drugs. I went on a 6 months vacation at the end of 2012 or summer 2012, and I came back January 2013. I think I went back home to Nigeria, and I moved out of Brampton. There's something called a geographical cure. I tried a lot of those even prior to going to Nigeria. I think I'd moved to Niagara Falls.
Right.
And so when I came back, I was like, Brampton's the problem. I'm going to move to Mississauga. And everything that I was struggling with followed me because I now know through a lot of the things that I was taught that it was with me. Everything that I was dealing with, fighting, was all within me. And it was in that time that I kind of just hit a place where like I was really high one day and I was just like, enough is enough. And I said, I'm gay. I think I said I was bisexual first. That's what it was. I came out as bisexual. I put it on my Facebook and Twitter and everything. And I remember my family calling me and being like, "Did your friends take over your social media again?" Because like anybody who grew up around that time, that happened a lot. Don't leave your Facebook open around your boys.
Well, are you bisexual?
No.
So that was just a way for you to ease into.
I think there wasn't a lot of understanding for me. I grew up in a heteronormative world, you know, boy meets girl, boy has girlfriend, mom and dad. And so I think there was a lot of conflict and confusion around like what this meant. And I think I was in the beginning stage of trying to figure that out. And so without completely having all the answers, I think the best way to look at it at the time was, I think I'm bisexual, which is how I went about it. And then, you know, it took some time after that and some experimenting and just like feeling out what I was truly comfortable with and what I was okay with to kind of lean into the identification of just like a gay male.
Mm-hmm. And when did you come out to your family specifically? I know they saw it on Facebook, but did you ever have that direct conversation with
that same day.
The same day?
Oh, they called. Like I said, they called and they thought maybe one of my friends had done something, you know.
Right.
It was the same day we had that conversation. You know, it wasn't the best conversation.
Now, was it like with one person in your family, everybody at once? How did that look?
It was with my parents,
okay,
specifically. There's a lot of people in my family I didn't talk to about it, but I think my parents are most important to me. Everybody else is just kind of like a byproduct, but like my parents were like, speaking to them was what mattered the most, and my siblings. But yeah, they weren't really pleased, I could say, you know?
Okay, we'll get into that. When you had that conversation, how did you feel going in?
Free.
So you weren't scared, you're ready to be free.
I think once it was said, there was no taking it back. I don't think I wanted to take it back. Mm-hmm. And so it's just like dealing with the repercussions at this point.
Okay. I got to ask, your dad's Nigerian, Christian. What did he say?
You can imagine Bible verses were quoted. He had said something like you could put a lipstick on a pig, but it's still a pig. I don't know why that one specifically I will never forget. And over the years, I've tried to understand it. I think it's like, don't forget you're a man. I still love you. There was always like an undertone. Without a doubt, I knew my parents loved me.
Right.
But obviously, when people are hurt, and I know this for myself, sometimes the way I can show love when I'm hurt might not portray I love you.
Okay. Interesting. And your mom, Christian mom, Nigerian woman.
How can you do this to me?
That's exactly what she said.
You know, I get it. She stuck by me through a lot. I was not the easiest kid. I got in a lot of fights in middle school and high school and all this. And mom always showed up. So I think at this point, it was just like, on top of everything else, this, you know.
Right. Understood. And yeah. And then did you talk to your siblings after that, or was once you told your parents, it kind of the word spread?
I had a conversation with my sister. I don't always recall like my conversations with her, but I know there was one specific one that was just like, I love you. We're friends. I don't want the differences in like our religious views or whatever to get in the way of that. Like, I got your back. Like, you're my brother. And so she kind of played the mediator between me and my parents for a number of years in the early days.
Right.
Which was like, it was needed, I think.
Did you rely on her a lot during those times as a confidant, like during that time when you were sort of figuring yourself out?
Big time, in a lot of ways. And it wasn't just like it's in reference to like my sexuality. I think also in reference to my addiction and recovery. She's one of those people that like showed up no matter what.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So now, for lack of better words, the cat's out of the bag,
mm-hmm.
right? And what happened? Now you're obviously in addiction, and you've come out to your family. What were the events that happened after that? Because you mentioned earlier that it got dark. Did it?
Yes.
And was this the sort of the tide of it getting dark, or was it still early?
I think it had gotten dark before, but like, coming out was a moment of trying to find light.
Okay.
was trying to find a way out of that darkness. I think the darkness for me was realizing, like I said, I reached a point where I knew I couldn't stop. So at this point, I had tried stopping. I had tried moving to different places. I tried leaving the country for a long vacation. So I think for me, that was the beginning of like, how do we stop this cycle that will kill me? I think I was very aware of that at the point. And so coming out was one of those moments where I was just like, if this is playing a role in this thing that is affecting my life, then it doesn't matter to me. Like family, religion, none of that mattered. I think that was one of the first moments where like I chose life.
Okay.
Even though I knew a lot of people wouldn't understand that, which is okay with me because I was playing the long game.
Okay, understood. And so, how did your drug use progress after that point? Tell us some stories about it. Like, what was your drug of choice? What was sort of your patterns of use? I think the audience would like to hear sort of what that felt and looked like for you.
So at the time in which I came out, the main, outside of like, the marijuana and the drinking, the main drugs that I was using was crack cocaine, methamphetamine. I think I was drinking a lot too at that time.
Okay.
I was drinking a lot more. I'm not, like I always say, I wasn't a big drinker, but around that phase of my life, I was doing a lot of drinking. And I'd gotten into fentanyl patches at that time. I got off of them in that year, but in that year, those are the ones that were like my drug of choices. And I think the thing about all three of those drugs, the crack cocaine, the methamphetamine, the fentanyl, even though like two are like uppers and one is like a major downer,
the whole roller coaster,
is that on any one of them, I got to disappear. Even if I became somebody else, I got to disappear. I didn't have to feel anything. I was numb. And the methamphetamine was a byproduct of like, it's very big in the gay community, in the queer community, actually, I should say.
I've actually heard that too. Why is that?
I would love to tell you that I have all the answers in that regard. What I do know is that, the areas in which I was introduced to it, or at least indulged and explored in it, came around things like, sex and partying, things like bathhouses and orgies and sex parties and, and that culture, that part of the culture. And there is like the queer scene and then the queer community. And I think a lot of young queer people, especially when we're first coming out and first being introduced to like queerness, and we're introduced to the queer scene, and it's a misrepresentation of the queer community. And so it's an unfortunate thing that happens. And I, like a lot of other people, kind of went through that,
you're in the scene,
was introduced to the scene, the party life, the nighttime, the dark spaces, the hush hush, the rush of it all. And it's a slippery slope because a lot of people get lost in there. I was lucky to find things like recovery, 12-step treatment centers, stuff like that, but not a lot of people do.
Okay. And we'll get to that part because I think that's a very important part of your story here, is to get to some of that, what the light looks like at the end of the tunnel. But you were talking a little bit about how that lifestyle, it seems like from how you're talking, was very exciting to you, right?
Yeah.
And now, I can only imagine, but someone in your position where you did come out and you're exploring your sexuality and you're figuring yourself out, how did that play a part in some of these parties? And I'm sure you probably had some wild times, right?
I mean, of course. I think it's very similar to the 17-year-old kid that found himself at a club like Government. It was another one of those like, wow, like I grew up, I'm not going to say sheltered, but like for the most part, sheltered from anything like that, So seeing things like these clubs and these raves and these the glow sticks and the lights and the drugs and the DJs and then years later you look at like coming out and being introduced to like drag shows and bathhouses and after hours. It's like it's a whole different ballgame. You're like, am I in a movie? It's just it's.
Did it seem surreal at the time?
It felt very surreal. It felt very surreal. It was almost like, how is this even like? How have I never? It's a double-edged sword because a lot of people get trapped in it because of this glamorizing look it has initially, and this opportunity to escape and to feel a rush and to connect. For somebody who felt disconnected, who felt alone, there's a sense of community there, and it's dangerous because like in that sense of community, there is a lot of opportunity for pain and hurt, and for somebody that's coming in with already a lot of those and is looking for purpose and connection. It's I don't want to say it's all bad because there's like positive rave communities and like queer communities, but in the scene in the nightlife there's definitely a lot of like non-kosher behavior, and that's what I was drawn to.
And like through all those behaviors and these after-hour events and parties, were there lines that you ever crossed that you didn't think you would?
Constantly. I think they happen so fast that sometimes I look back and be like, I can't believe I did that. Smoking crack was one. Smoking meth was one. I wasn't raised with an understanding and education around these drugs, so I don't even think when I got into them I knew how bad they were. I knew I shouldn't be doing it, but like the extent in which like it was bad, I don't think I understood that. And as far as like the queer scene and the spaces I was in, the bathhouses and stuff, like things like drug-induced field orgies, things like that. And those lines would bring me to darker moments, like I said earlier. And I think one for me that like I'll share because it's like it's important for people to know this is the danger in that is, during a breakup and a fight with an ex, I found myself at the bathhouse, one of the bathhouses, and I was, when emotionally filled, not responsibly doing any of the drugs I was doing to begin with, very irresponsibly doing a drug called GHB. And I kind of blacked out in that moment. And I came to, God knows how many hours later, in one of the rooms. I don't even think it was the room I initially rented. And there were multiple guys in my room, one between my legs. And I remember that day thinking, like, this is where this goes. I don't remember thinking, like, this is their fault. They're horrible people. They shouldn't have done that. I was out cold. But this wasn't on them. I think it was the first time I was able to look at it and be like, I put myself here. Every choice that I made leading up to this, I put myself in this situation. What has happened to my life? What happened to that little kid that like loved drama and went to acting modeling school and played sports and loved singing in the choir? Like I had one of those like, wow, this isn't good. Right. And I don't blame the community. I don't blame the scene. Could it be better? Could we have better support and representation around not letting every young queer person kind of be exposed to that? And like, yes, but in that moment, I think I needed to look at where I had made choices that put myself there.
Okay. And like talking, and thank you for sharing that. And talking about that specific moment, was that a catalyst for you to start making change, or were you still deep into it? Did it take you a while to get this thing?
I think that was during the journey.
Okay.
That was during the journey. I think I faced a lot of things during the journey that made me see the reality of the world that I was living in, the choices I was making. And that was one of many big ones that was like, if I keep going this way, I am going to die. Whether it's like, God forbid, suicidal ideations and choices, or putting myself in a situation where it happens.
Okay. And so that was the catalyst. It was a part of your journey. What kind of got you to sort of start working on yourself and getting, and you're part of the 12-step program, right? What started that journey and that thought process there? I know a lot of people have different ways they get there.
Yeah.
What was your way of getting there?
For me, I think it's like I got to the point where I wasn't able to keep apartments. I wasn't able to keep jobs. This is in the year I turned 21, same 2013 period. Right. But my mom was helping me out, pay for hotels, motels, and I bounced around from one place to another. And I was at one. I remember it like it was yesterday. It was I think it was a Howard Johnson on the street, Queen and Kennedy, Brampton's no longer Howard Johnson, and was it the Howard Johnson? No, it was the Best Western by the 410 exit on Queen Street, so just up the street.
Okay.
Bounce around a lot of them, and I was there, and I think I was doing a lot of drugs as I said I did, you know.
Right.
Meth, crack, this, that, with a whole bunch of people, one of which I knew and one I didn't know, and all these other people that were strangers in that world. And I think I looked around, and like another one of those moments where I was just like, what has happened? You know, what has happened? What is my life? And I called a good friend of mine that we went to the same high school, kind of grew up together. We kind of been in that same world in and out. And him and his mother picked me up and brought me to their house. And it was in that moment, in those few days after kind of coming off withdrawing. I didn't know anything about detoxes at the time, so I withdrawed in their basement off all these drugs. And a couple of our buddies were over. The guys were all downstairs shooting darts, drinking, and I went upstairs and sat in the living room on my own. And his mother came down, and she saw me sitting there in the dark on the couch and was like, "What's good?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm okay." And she went to walk away, and I broke down. And I think it was the first time I told somebody how I was feeling. You know, everything with my parents, everything with how I was feeling, and just feeling lost. And turns out she was a social worker. Turns out she had worked with this guy
What are the odds?
in Toronto that was at a pre-treatment facility. He was the intake worker there, and they had gone to school together. They had worked together in Mississauga previously, and she was like, "I can call him for you, and I can introduce you to him and kind of just take it from there." And so she did that. I called him. He asked for a bit of my story. I told him. He said, "You sound like a good candidate. Call me every morning for the next few days." Within a week, a bed was available in October 27, 2013. That's what it was. I was being driven to Toronto by my best friend and his brother, and I went to this pre-treatment center at this place called the Good Shepherd, and they had a facility on the second floor called the DARE program, and I did my intake that day. It was a culture shock. I was not used to something like that. I was not raised exposed to things like that. I think prior to that, I was just oblivious about my lifestyle. Although I had done drugs like crack and meth, I think I always thought I was very different from the people that I would walk by or drive by or see on the streets, because like I still had roofs over my head. And although I was no longer keeping jobs, I was still able to get jobs in order to lose them. And, you know, so for me, there was this line where it's just like, but I'm not like you. And that move to that facility and that place was a shelter. And on the second floor, they had a pre and post treatment drug and alcohol program where this guy Michael worked at. And when I came in that day, it was during a time period where the homeless population were coming in to eat. And so like I got to walk through that cafeteria with my buddy and his brother with all my stuff, like, you know, body pillow, duvet, and all this, and being like, I remember my buddy being like, "Yo, I can call my mom."
The DARE program glammed up with everything.
Oh, I mean, I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I wasn't coming back anytime soon, so I like brought everything I needed. But yeah, that was the beginning of my journey. I would say ever since then it's just been like an uphill battle. But like that's where I got introduced to 12 steps. That's where I got introduced to places like Renaissance, which I went to myself as a client and ended up working at years later. That's where I got introduced to all the, you know, opportunities I've had, you know, resources at CAMH, you know, therapy, psychotherapy.
So did it work the first time that you went in?
No, I was 21. And I don't want to say like, oh, a 21-year-old can't go into recovery and get clean. A lot of young people have come in and gotten clean and just never looked back.
Right.
But I think I was at an age where it's harder sometimes for young folks to admit defeat or like to just see it clearly. Like it's like, oh, maybe I was just young, which is what narratives that went through my head. You know, maybe it was like the situation of being in the closet.
Right.
Maybe if I get used to like being a openly out queer man, I won't want to use. You know. Maybe it was my abandonment. If I work through that, I'll be fine. You know, all these things, there was like, maybe these things were the problem.
Okay. So 21, you're in there. You got exposed to it. It didn't work in that sense, but you were exposed to that this is where potentially the solution could lie. Now, fast forward now, 10 plus years, I think it'd be great for the audience to hear. How many times did you try during that time?
Multiple. So I am 2.5 years clean at the moment. The most clean time I've had is 4 years, and I've celebrated 3 1-year medallions. So quite a few
Quite a few trials. Now,
trials and tribulations.
so you've had multiple kicks at the can, for lack of better terms. 1 year, 4 years. I know the audience wants to know a little bit. Like, isn't that a bit daunting? Like, what brought you back every time?
I think the seed had been planted. There's one thing that was undeniable was that whether or not in my brain I had these thoughts of maybe I was too young, or maybe if I just work on this, like, they refer to that as reservations, that, maybe I'm not like them completely. Like, yeah, maybe I'm an addict, but maybe not the same kind of addict Joe Blow is or Cindy Sam is. Like, I might be the, like, different one that can, like, still find a way to, like, I want to have a drink at my wedding and, like, all these things, And I think each time I came back, there was always this, like, undeniable moment where I was just like, no matter what, the moments and the spurs in which I was in the program and the fellowship were the only time that I could remember having a moment to breathe, being around people that understood me. And most of the understandings and the teachings that I got about learning about myself were in those moments. And so it's like, when I thought about it, every time I hit a dark place or a bottom, the only place I thought to go was back to a 12-step fellowship or a 12-step program, a treatment center, a detox, all these resources that I didn't know existed prior to. And so now I knew there were places to go to get help.
Right. And you're 2.5 years sober now, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's different now than over the multiple other attempts that you made? Like, what is what you feel is like the clear and key difference?
So I think for me, I don't know if you remember earlier, I referred to it as an uphill battle. I think in a lot of those different journeys that I've been on, because I see them as journeys, there's been an opportunity to fine tune something or change something. And I think each time I got to look at, like, a different area that hadn't been focused on. Like in the very initial beginning, that first 1-year medallion I had was the first time that I went through the 12 steps completely.
Right.
And so it was the first time that I got a taste of, like, oh, if I apply myself to this thing, I can get something out of it. They refer to it as you get what you put in, which is like in anything in life. And so I think the second go around it, when I got those 4 years, I was like, well, if I put in this much last time and I got that much, maybe I put in a little bit more and I get this much, which is exactly what happened. But I think there were a lot of areas, I know there were a lot of areas where I still held on to certain lifestyle choices and things that I wasn't ready to let go of. So in this ongoing journey that I'm on today, what is different? Choosing to let go of a lot of things that I had kind of kept near and dear out of fear. Some of it was just like.
And what are some of those things? Just, I think the audience would like to hear that too.
A lot of it is fear-based. So one of the major ones for me that I'll share is, like, this fear of loneliness, this fear that, like, I will never find somebody that will love me despite anything that I've been through, or that if somebody really gets to know me and knows my history and all the things that it's too ugly and nobody will want that. And, like, all these thoughts play a narrative in the brain. And that fear has pushed me to something called lust for many years. Mm-hmm. So it's like, well, if I'm not going to get that, I might as well just, like, act out in lust. And so that had been a big one for years that, like, I held on to control. That was the one thing I can control, whether it be through, resources like Grindr. For those who don't know what that is, it's like, I'm not going to call it a dating app because it's not, but it's like a hookup app for the queer community. Or just, like, cruising. For those who don't know what that is, it's what queer people did. It's like, goes as far back as, like, I don't even know how far back it goes, but it goes very far back as to, like, times where people weren't allowed to be openly queer, and they would find spaces that they would go and, like, cruise each other and things like that. And so little behaviors like that I just held on to for many years. And through those behaviors and acting out in those ways, it fed a narrative of, like, I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, and eventually that kind of plays a toll on that like fear of loneliness, or I will never be a part of something, or I don't deserve real love in some way or another. And that's not healthy. It kind of counteracts all the healthy work that I do in recovery. So this time around, I've been trying to focus more on things like that, fear-based things. 12 steps in itself is referred to as a spiritual program. And a big part of that is like finding a sense of like a spiritual connection with a higher power, with a God of your own understanding. And so for me, I've been able to take a lot from like my religious upbringing and things that I've always kind of leaned into believing even as a kid.
Right.
And adding that to now what my practice of spirituality is. And it's like, if I do believe in a sense of a God, in which for me understandably is loving and kind and forgiving and all of these things, and I have faith that that God will show up for me no matter what I'm going through, then in a way, fear and worry and doubt, there's no room for it. So in those areas of like, I will never find love, or if someone gets to know the real me, they won't like it, or I have no worth in that area, I have no business living in that place. Understandably, my brain will go there because the brain does what the brain does, and it's a powerful thing. But I no longer have to feed into it. And I no longer have to feel the need to control it. And it's not been easy. I'm not going to sit here and say, although I've said these things to you and can articulate them, that it's been an easy go, but it's a constant journey, sometimes day to day, sometimes week to week, of having to reapply that thought process, recommit to that, spiritual practice, ask for guidance, ask for peace, ask for strength to not act out, to not, control, to not fear, to not worry, to not have doubts, like
Right.
that everything in my life is happening for a reason, as my grandmother used to say. And the more that I do that, the more things get presented to me, like, opportunities that I'm facing in my life now. And it's just like, oh, let me just like focus on these things. And if I keep doing the things that are in front of me, the things that I need are always provided for me, then I'll get to the place that I'm supposed to get to when I'm supposed to get there.
Right.
Maybe that God that I understand knows that there is no room in my life today for a partner. Yes, I would love a partner. I'm a hopeless romantic. I romanticize about like that perfect husband and, the life, when we go work out together and do these together and da 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 da. But the truth of the matter is, where I'm at in my life today, it would take a lot away from. Right. So I'm not in that place as much as I would want it. So like a lot of it, I start to realize it's not what I need, it's what I want.
Okay. So
if I do believe in faith, then that will come in its time, but there's still so much work to be done. Right. So what makes this go different than all the others is like really trying to lean into that faith and just be in each moment and not growing from anywhere else but where I'm at right now, which, like I said, it's not as easy as I make it sound. It requires constant work, but
well, you do make it sound a little bit easy.
And that's why I must reiterate, like I can articulate it and make it sound easy, but it's not that easy. It is actually hard work. But that's what it makes it worth it for me, because like nothing in life should come easy, right? As much as I can understand it, I should also understand it's going to take work. Like anything else I've ever done in my life, it took practice. Football, I didn't just go into football and was good at it. I was the fastest kid on my team, but I couldn't catch. And it took a while for the coach to realize I like to hit. So corner, safety, and running back was the positions I played. Going into drama, what kind of roles was I going to play? When I was in choirs, right. Was I going to be an alto, soprano, a baritone? And over the years, that has changed so many times. Going through puberty, now I'm a baritone. Before that, I was like this angelic, like soprano. There's all these different things but it took practice. Right. I had a vocal teacher, and I had to constantly do that to get to a certain place. So it's like anything else in life. I don't want it to be easy, because if it was easy, I might not appreciate all of the like beautiful moments that come with it. Right. Every time that I get to a new level, let's call it, to extend to a new phase, to be catapulted, these little beautiful things. So yeah, this journey is definitely very different, because I find myself more willing to do the uncomfortable work.
Okay. And before we close out today, I want to ask you just one question that you mentioned before, and you got all these things out of working the 12 steps and working on yourself. I'm going to ask you the $1 million question, right? Are you happy?
I used to chase happiness. I'm going to answer that question, but I'm not going to say I'm happy. I'm going to say I find joy in my life today. Happiness comes and goes. That's, happiness is fleeting. And I think for many years I chased happiness and I mistook it for joy. I have joy in my life today. I have a beautiful relationship with my mother. We talked about what that looked like when I came out. If we had more time, I would go into it, but I have a beautiful relationship with my mother today. And we've come full circle where, she reached out and she wanted to understand me. And I, because of the work I did in 12 steps and outside of 12 steps, was willing to open that door to heal together after taking some time apart. I have a ongoing work in progress relationship with my father, where because of some of the work that I did in 12 steps and outside of 12 steps, I was able to see him, to separate, this is my dad, is like, this is just a man who did the best he can with what he had.
Right.
And he made mistakes just as I've made mistakes, and acknowledge some of the things he's gone through and allow us to, man meet man and kind of grow in that sense. And, that was a beautiful process.
Does he still drop Bible verses on you?
No. Well, I mean, he's Christian, so yeah, from time to time, and if anybody knows anything about Nigerians, and a lot of conversation in Jesus' name it gets, repeated and mentioned. But that's normal. And as a son of a Nigerian, you say amen, because that's what you do. And things like that. I have beautiful relationships, meaningful relationships today with like friends, and like friends who were chosen family and were there before I reconnected with my own family, and we show up for each other. We're accountable to each other. We're responsible to each other. We throw birthdays for each other. When we move, we show up to wherever the other person is.
Sounds like you're not lonely anymore.
No, and I think that's where I mistook the chasing the lust and the fear of being alone, and really just realizing everything I need is in front of me. And so, to practice what it's like to show up in a relationship, the God of my understanding provided me with an opportunity to do that with the people that are in my life right now. Right. And, I'm leaning into that being enough to make room for what comes next.
Okay. Yeah, it's amazing to hear. And I mean, let's just end off by opening the floor. Like, what are some of your closing remarks? Like, what do you want to say to the people that might be listening right now, that might be struggling, and are looking to find a way out like you have, and maybe felt some of the things that you felt?
I think I'm going to do this as if I was speaking to like 21-year-old me. I think I struggled a lot because I got in my own way and I didn't understand, and I didn't try my best to understand. And I think it's really, really, really important to try to understand everything. I talked about the gay scene and the rave scene and the underground scene, and funny enough, some of those scenes are a big part of my life today. I go clubbing, and I go out to Pride every year, and I do all these things that back then I would do, and I'd find myself in all the negative spaces. We are capable of doing these things if you want to. I'm capable of going to parties and going to clubs and going to festivals and going to, all these things. I'm capable of doing that today because I have an understanding of myself. On my, in AA, there's you can put on your medallion little inscribes, and my first medallion ever, I put, "To thy own self be true," because I wanted to know myself. I think coming into this whole journey, and a lot of people could probably relate to this, I didn't know myself. And so if I leave you with anything, is get to really know yourself. Not who I was with other people, who I thought I had to be with other people, not the masks that I wore for protection or whatever it is I tell myself it was or that it was, but who I truly am to the core. Because when I know that person and I understand that person, I can show up in any space and not feel the need to conform, not feel the need to change, not feel the need to, the loving friends and family and people in my life today love me because of me, who I am. and I continue to evolve in that person. But I must first know what the core of that person looks like to build from it. So get to know yourself. And so when I say understand, I mean understand you. I wish 21-year-old me knew that, like, I needed to focus more on understanding me as opposed to trying to be accepted by everybody else.
Right.
And, self-image is a beautiful thing. But if I could have told 21-year-old me something, I would have said, do not try to rule or control with your self-image. I'm a fashionable person. I like to look good. And that's okay. I can keep that today, but I don't have to control through it. Right. And that has been a beautiful thing to learn over the years, is like, I don't need to control. I can hold on to that. I can have that. But it doesn't need to be something that is used as like a way for you to validate me. It can be for me to feel good about me. But it doesn't need to be what controls how I feel all the time. It can just be a complement to how I'm feeling on the inside. So yes, big part for me was really getting to know myself to the core and giving myself the permission to live as that person. Because in truth, if I kept living as all the versions I thought everybody wanted me to be, and all those masks that I wore, and all those people that loved me and accepted me for all those versions, then I was never really myself, and nobody actually really loved me or accepted me. It was a facade, an idea that I created for them because I thought that's where I needed to be. So does anybody really like me? No. Okay. And that reality was hard to swallow. So this reality is better because at least I can sleep at night.
That's a great way to sort of end that. This reality is better. Now, just one final fun thing before we end off. 3 words to describe Olu's mentality, his ethics, everything that you sort of learn now. If you were just have 3 words to describe some of those things, what are those 3?
Ecstatic, vulnerable, and honest.